Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Build Amazing Things Securely. I'm still Laura Belmain, and we are on a journey together where we are looking at how we develop secure software, but more focused on the why, because we're building the future made of amazing technologies that are going to change the world. Today, I am absolutely thrilled to have with me Jon Gelsey. Now, for those who know who he is, he needs no introduction, but instead of me butchering his introduction, which I have tried to write 3 times now, I'm going to get Jon to introduce himself. So, Jon, who are you as a human, and why would I be talking to you today?
Well, let's see. I think it's accurate to describe myself now as unemployed. That tends to kill the conversations with at VC meetings and such, which is awesome because I figure if they're not smart enough to have done a research on the people attending, why spend any time with them? But in reality, what that really means is I'm sort of helping out startups. Doing some consulting, sitting on a few boards, advising, I really should say, sitting on a few boards, all tech startups, because my background is before I became unemployed, or I became unemployed when I was fired by the acquirer of my last company, and the acquirer was Apple. And my last company was XNOR.ml, an Allen Institute for AI here in Seattle, and University of Washington spin out that did really compelling edge machine learning, which means pattern recognition. And if you have an iPhone, a modern iPhone, you're using our technology in there right now. We became one of the sort of the core of Apple's machine learning team post-acquisition. Before that, I was with a security company in the Seattle area called Auth0, which was sold 2 years ago to Okta for $6.5 billion, which was I think the largest private transaction ever in Seattle history, one of the largest transactions in the US over the last few years. Before that, 7 years with Microsoft in strategy, corporate development, that means acquisitions or investments. Before that, 6 years as a VC with Intel Capital. And then I started my career, I actually had a real job at one point as a supercomputer designer for a company called Convex Computer in the Dallas, Texas area. And we were acquired in the mid-90s by Hewlett-Packard to be the high end of their server line. If you've ever used an HP Superdome, for the older listeners to this podcast, that was one of the machines that I designed, was on the design team for. So,
Jon, where do we even begin? So what I love about you is I was reading through your LinkedIn prepping for this, and you're the only person I've ever seen that has this amazing list of accolades. And then just at the line at the bottom where most of us put, and I have a dog, you have, I invented a US patent for hydrogen fuel cells. So what an amazing set of experiences and technologies to have been around. We're talking about building the amazing things of the future. And at many stages of your career, you've been around the future that was to come. So thank you so much for your time. Can I ask, though, I'm going to have to ask because I need to feel like you're actually mortal somewhere underneath here. Did you ever have that rubbish part-time job before all of this? Have you had a normal mortal job?
Yeah, I started delivering newspapers when I was 12 years old.
Okay, good to know that we can all get to where you are.
And I was a busboy in the local Chinese restaurant for a while. So clearly at the bottom of the totem pole. And it kind of got better from there. When I left that job, by chance, I became a gopher at a lab at a geophysics laboratory at the University of Houston, and I got to pour silicon molds of salt domes and other things that oil people care about that we would put in a giant water tank, which I also, as a whatever I was at the time, 16 or 17 year old, got to go diving in to adjust things. And that was awesome. That was the best minimum wage job ever.
Fantastic.
And they'd been given, shows how old I am and how long ago, they had a VAX mini computer, a digital equipment VAX mini computer. And as well as even worse, a Raytheon 704 with actual magnetic core memory. And so that was where I started getting exposed to interesting computers, and I would borrow people's accounts and start playing with them and such. And that was, I highly recommend those kinds of low-end minimum wage jobs if it gives you access to interesting technology that might inform what you really might want to do later in life. So
That's really cool. And actually now spotted the little crossover between us. My first programming job was as a COBOL and SCL developer on a VAX VMS emulator because
oh,
they couldn't
awesome.
actually get the real computers anymore. So we were writing emulators on top of emulators.
Well,
Right.
you said COBOL, so you have my sympathies, but all
Absolutely.
programming is good. So
Yeah, I've lived and learned. All right. Okay. So let's have a talk. So you've been around all of these future technologies. What has driven you to be at the edge of these? Why has it just been luck? Has it been judgment? What what got you to the position where you were, at the edge of authentication as would become widely rolled out, at the in the place where machine learning becomes part of what Apple does day to day?
actually, I think it's primarily luck, to tell you the truth. I think my career is best described as a series of serendipitous events. That being said, I guess luck favors the prepared. Um, I have always had an inclination of being um, easily bored, I guess I'll say, and so sort of attracted to stuff that is kind of on the edge and hasn't been done before, or hasn't been done that way before, because everything's been done before. And more than anything else, try to see if maybe I could do it, because it's kind of fun to test yourself. My joke is it's like running a marathon. I mean, nobody normal ever runs a marathon to impress anyone else, or if you think you're impressing anybody else, you're fooling yourself. You do it just to see if you can do it. And if you can, awesome. You've it's very satisfying. If you can't, like, nobody else knew you were doing it, so cool. You haven't lost anything. And so yeah, I guess it was sort of the natural curiosity, but also the eagerness to try and sort of see what I might be able to do, especially when it wasn't something that I was supposed to be able to do. So I highly recommend people trying stuff that they're told that they should not be able to do.
I absolutely love that as a message, especially given what we talk about in this podcast. A lot of the technologies we collect the stories of, from agriculture to fashion to gaming, all of them were told at some point, why this isn't possible. Don't do that. That's a silly idea. And I think that's that spirit that underpins new technologies that go on to change individual spaces.
Absolutely.
Um,
Let
so
me
yeah.
actually, if I could, let me tell one other illustrative anecdote. So back when I was a VC for Intel Capital, I had one deal I brought in for consumer storage, that my committee hated, and they told me how dumb I was, because clearly Microsoft was going to do this. And nobody going to head to head against Microsoft could ever win. So why did I even waste their time? And I didn't really have a good answer for that. And after I got to Microsoft, I realized the answer was that Microsoft does indeed have brilliant, brilliant people and sort of more money than God. And so, yes, they could do anything they wanted to. They can't, except they can't, because everybody's booked up for the next 18 to 24 months, number one. And so if you have some exciting new thing that you want to go do, especially as a network effect, and so you need to be first mover, they can't move quickly enough, number one. Number two, it's Microsoft. Their focus is on their $1 billion, or maybe right now their $10 billion product lines. And so you come in and say, well, look at this. This could generate $100 million the first year. They're like, $100 million? You mean 47 minutes of cash flow? So what? And so when I often hear of people not doing something because they think the competitive environment is not tractable for it. Don't worry about that. You can count on your competitors for whatever your new product or technology is being. Actually, they're like really, really busy with whatever business model and product they have right now. And your cool new thing that they could do, they won't do. Okay, until you're moderately successful and they say, oh, maybe we should start paying attention to X. But even then, it'll take them 18 months to get organized. So yeah, if you have a cool new technology and you're convinced a product offering technology, whatever, and you're convinced it's really cool and nobody else is doing it, and you just go for it. Don't worry about the competition. You can count on their incompetence to protect you for at least a few years.
I love the message of this. I'm hopeful that our audience will, be inspired if they've had that like little itch that they've been like, oh, I should totally do that. You should totally do that. Yeah, John told you. So, okay, so now I have to bring it back to security, right? So I live in this weird hybrid space between the software development world and the security world, and often those two sides of me are at odds. So, in your view, and we're asking for feelings and opinions here, John. So, I do not judge. Where does security fit into these early, new, amazing technologies? How important is it that we have it there? And where's the line that we draw of what we can and can't do when something's super early stage?
Um, I've got a prejudice here, having been part of a security company, but I think I would have said this from like, day one of my career. It's really important. It's not something you can compromise on. The reason is that security is a form of technical debt. Okay. You will, if you ignore a security aspect, I'll just make up some silly thing, I'll do the 2FA later. I don't need that now. I mean, I have complex password rules, that's good enough. No, you will be hacked. You will have to respond to a security vulnerability that you've ignored or put out of your mind in the future, and it's a heck of a lot harder to respond in the future than it is to do it right on day one. Okay, now there's always a compromise. If I have to spend, if I delay product shipment for a year and I'm going to run out of money in 6 months, if delay product shipment for a year to put in a security feature, okay, yeah, I mean that's sort of a bigger, that I guess that makes you more secure if your product is dead and you're not selling any. That's pretty secure.
Oh, no.
But so there's always that sort of judgment call, but it's rarely the, oh my God, we're going to slip everything for a year because of some putting in a security feature. No, it doesn't take much time, and you do it now, or it hopefully doesn't take very much time, because fast forward a year or 2 years and you're wildly successful. And by the way, you should always plan on being wildly successful. Don't plan on, I don't know, we'll be able to fix it. They'll only have 10 customers. It's like, no, you're going to be wildly successful and you're going to have 10,000 customers. Now you're going to go back and obsolete all of their applications because your library has a security vulnerability in it. And they've got to they've got to rewrite their code because you needed sort of one additional argument for I don't know, whatever, some secret or something in your library. It's like, that's really painful, and you're going to have like massive complaints from your customers. And if you had just done it right to begin with, you would never have to deal with that. It is a form of technical debt. So to me, the answer is always no. You got to do it on day one. So now I'm sorry, and then I have a second sort of corporate strategy legal thought on this. So I have a hypothesis which I've had for, I don't know, 7 or 8 years now, which hasn't come quite to fruition, but we're getting a lot closer, that security is the new asbestos. So in the US, there is, in fact, I have a friend from college who made lots of money from suing as companies that generated asbestos that caused their workers or other people to get sick. Okay. And that was a massive legal industry. Lots of people made lots of money other than the asbestos companies who all went bankrupt. Security is kind of the same thing. It's like, the Johns Mansville or whoever was like spraying asbestos dusts everywhere. They were like, hey, it's a little cheaper to do this. Like, fine, it's just asbestos. What's the harm? And whatever it was, 20 years later, they were bankrupt because it's like, oh, there is actually massive harm for this. You have externalized your cost savings onto the population, and in fact, not only you saved a penny by externalizing it, but this is costing you $100 because you've caused so much damage from this. This is what the risk security has. I save a week out of my schedule by not putting in a security feature. And I suddenly, opened up my social application to, I don't know, the Russian mafia or whatever they're called now that do hacking or whatever third party, private mafias, state-sponsored mafias. There's a bunch of them out there because it's a great business. And they just use this to compromise, I don't know, a military installation or, to compromise a giant corporation. And suddenly there's like billions or tens of billions of dollars that have been risked because somebody's been able to do a phishing attack by impersonating you, by pretending to be you on your stupid social application that had a vulnerability in it. And or you've killed hundreds or thousands of people if it's a military thing or whatever. It's incredible downside risk compared with the tiny cost savings you have by not doing security. So I describe all of this because it would be context for the court case, the asbestos-like court case. It's like, oh, John Co. didn't do the 1 week of effort that would have stopped, the thing from exploding. Jury, would you want to take a judgment against him? And those judgments are already happening. It's going to accelerate. So it's like, would you design a car that had a gas tank that would explode when you looked at it? Not that you're the Ford Pinto in 1974. No, you won't. Let's build applications that are insecure and hence are going to get people killed or cost my customers or myself tens of billions of dollars. Do it right the first time. And then finally, don't be. It's embarrassing because we know how to do security right. You're a bad engineer if you're not doing security right now.
I love this, John.
Just for your own personal satisfaction, you should be doing security right because it's just sloppy not to.
I love that because we all know people who are engineers, and there's different personality types. We have the folks who are just curious and want to play and explore. We have the folks who they are perfectionists. They are the software crafts people, if you will. They're the ones who want to make sure that the abilities are all managed well. And I think the more engineers we get, and I think my last bit of research showed there were about 30 million in the world. The more we get of each of these personality types. So there we go. Listen to John. You're bad at your job if you don't consider this. Now, I can never be that bold, but he can. So that's wonderful. Now, I think this is actually a really nice segue in talking a little bit about your journey with Auth0. Now, obviously, you've done many other wonderful things. And this isn't just about Auth0 as a product. So, we're not here to try and sell things, but I think it's interesting to how on earth you got to the point where you had an authentication tool, if you will, that was being used by so many organizations over the world and became that, giant acquisition it was. So what's the backstory? Did you just wake up one day and go, I really love authentication?
No, actually. The backstory is that the two technical co-founders, Matthias and Eugenio, had started actually Auth0 LLC back in early 2013, and they couldn't make a go of it. It was essentially, they were hoping to be a product company. They got one professional services job. So Eugenio and I, by serendipity, happened to sit on a nonprofit board for a school for kids on the autism spectrum here in Seattle. And Eugenio's kid is on the spectrum. And so we sort of got to know each other through that board work. And so I guess midway through 2013, he started lobbying me to be CEO. It's like, oh, you could be really helpful. And I'm thinking to myself, I've got this cushy Microsoft job. Why would I want to go work with your stupid startup? So I politely declined, but he was persistent and he's charming and he's smart. And I actually had authentication as part of my strategy portfolio, corporate portfolio at Microsoft. So I was sort of familiar with it to a degree, as a sort of naively, I guess I'll say, as a, whatever, finance or strategy guy or whatever. And I was kind of realizing as I sort of learned more about what they were doing, it's like, well, there's probably a reasonable niche here. And I suspect I could take what they're struggling with trying to get off the ground, and I could probably turn it into something that could be at least a few tens of millions of dollars of revenue because it's a giant market. And, we could have a decent exit and, cool, why not? Let me just see if I can do it. Let me see if I can run this marathon. And that was how I fell into it. So not intentionally, serendipitously, but then I guess I'll say, as I said before, luck favors the prepared. So I had enough background. So I was like, I can kind of see how I would connect the dots. Let me see if I can make those dots connect.
And why do you think, in your opinion, that Auth0 has been so popular with the development community? What is it about that technology that means that people just reach for that instead of rolling their own authentication?
it's a lot easier as maybe the summary. Actually, the dean of my engineering school, UT Austin, University of Texas at Austin, used to tell us, and when he first said this, I was like, what? He said, a good engineer is a lazy engineer. I said, what? He says, yeah, because, your boss will tell you to do X. And if you do X immediately, a month later when he'll say, oh, by the way, all the requirements changed and all of your work's sort of wasted. So you kind of do things sort of as in the most efficient way possible. But of course, all software engineers know that, you can easily get consumed in like rewriting your own, reinventing the wheel. And so you don't do that anymore. I mean, back when I was a kid, you'd write a lot of stuff from scratch. Now, of course, software development is grabbing components and putting them together. It's composable essentially for the most part. And then you sprinkle on your own business logic or whatever the heck it is. And so where Auth0 differentiated itself from all of the other players at the time, the Stormpaths and Microsofts and Okta and ForgeRock and Ping and everybody else, is that we were easier to use. And we were easier to use, I think, for sort of two reasons. And this is, I think, Matthias's genius more than anything else. So Matthias had sort of came up with the idea of Auth0 as he was working through a consulting project he was doing for GlaxoSmithKline, replatforming their authentication. And kind of his summary was, this is pretty hard for me. I mean, like, what about like an ordinary engineer? Oh my God. I mean, he meant ordinary and not someone who was steeped in all the arcana of authentication. Because then here's the second part, that authentication, well, conceptually, it's pretty easy. It's like, hey, look up a username and a password and we're done, right? It's just a database. It's a bunch of security engineers, and every security engineer is trying to impress every other security engineer. And there's all these acronyms and this and that, and you have to have this flexibility and corner case here. And so when I'm using a Ping or a ForgeRock or whatever, man, it's painful if you are not a, super wizard, been at it for a long time. Auth0, in effect, emulated the motion that a Stripe or a Twilio had, and that there's a commodity backhand that, because of the way it's evolved in the market, it's like really hard to use. I mean, have you ever tried to use the Bank of America APIs for credit card transactions? I mean, don't. It's just massively painful. But they do it for good reasons if you're a payments person or if you're a communication person for SMS like Twilio. Here's an abstraction layer that makes something that's hard because it's complex and there's social reasons for the engineers there and the companies there continuing to make it complex, making that an abstraction layer to make it easy so you can just do what you want to do, send the SMS or get the credit card or get my login authenticated and get a security token from Active Directory or from whoever my backend is. So Auth0's magic and sort of the realization that Matthias and then when he brought in Eugenio as well, had there's an opportunity here for having an abstraction layer that was mostly prescriptive, but was still flexible enough so that the security engineers can do their magical corner case security thing. In the same way, there was that up-market opportunity for a Twilio or a Stripe. One of our relatively early customers was AGL, the largest utility in Australia. And I remember the CTO telling me, he said, I've done 6 digital transformations. Nobody knows what digital transformation means, by the way, but he'd done 6 of them.
We won't tell anyone.
Yeah, and they all required authentication. And he says, we are at month 2 with you guys, Auth0, where we're in year 2 for each of the other ones. And he says it's because authentication is a tar ball covered with razor blades. Every time you touch it, your fingers get bloody, and it's just like, oh my God. And you guys like abstracted all that away from us, so we can kind of touch it, and we got it to work, and now we can move on. That was the powerful thing, making the complex. It's complex for a reason. Backend, abstracting it for the 90% of cases where I don't really need to understand all of that abstraction, and still being flexible enough that last 10% for your weird corner case inside your enterprise, which everybody has. That was sort of the magic. And again, it's the same motion that Twilio or Stripe or other other abstractions in front of complex commodity backends have used. Anyway, I saw that dynamics and said, okay, that's something we can play with. So
this is really interesting, because I think there's definitely a lot of feelings on the internet about, building your own authentication system. And I think just this week alone, we've had very young companies being very public with how you should always just build your own because it's super easy and it only takes an hour. And many of us who've been around a little while longer, have a few more gray hairs, just kind of quietly sit back and go, oh, cool, good luck. But I think a lot of the reason we can build some of the amazing technologies that we're doing right now, and can do so with a degree of security built in, is the idea that we have now established commodity services, as you're describing, the Twilios and the Stripes and all of the other competitors in those spaces, that take those bits away so we can focus on what makes our problem interesting to us. So, if I happen to be in fashion technology, I don't care about authentication, but I need it there. I want to focus on my little part of the world. So that's how Auth0 got to where it was, right? World famous, massive acquisition, fantastic big party. So as someone who's been around that space for a while, and you must have been asked questions on it many, many times, where do you think this space is headed? Where is authentication going to go?
excellent question. To tell you the truth, I won't be surprised if it looks 20 years from now kind of like what it looks like now. And the reason is that I don't know, it's why the US still has like the stupid imperial system instead of the metric system, even though clearly it's much better to use the metric system. It's more efficient and easier, blah, 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 except that there are so many dependencies. Actually, let me step back and put it a different way. People would come to me and say, hey, Auth0 is amazing because, you have a new way to do authentication, and I've got another company that's going to be the successor to Auth0. It's another new way to do authentication. I'm like, you don't get it. Auth0 is not a new way to do authentication. Auth0 is a way to deal with the authentication system you were handed inside your enterprise. That was a piece of shit. And it was a piece of shit not because of bad engineers. It's because all authentication is it's always a federation of a bunch of different sources of truth. And there's the weird corner cases. And I'm the German citizen in Bavaria, and I've got to do this one additional check for GDPR or whatever, the German GPA, whatever the heck it is. And so I need a solution that is not a new way to do authentication. It's a solution that allows me to deal with the ways I'm being forced to use authentication today, to make that easier, more tractable, and so I can then go on and do my real work as opposed to getting this stupid authentication component working. And that's why I'm thinking that authentication is going to look about the same 20 years from now as it does now. It's because you'll still have all of those weird corner cases where I've got the custom database running and that was written in COBOL and a IBM something or other that's still around for some good business reason, or bad business reason, and it's just there for laziness. I don't care. I got to work with it. I don't have a choice. And so I got to have that abstraction layer that makes all of the different little pieces and weird exceptions and such in my enterprise work. And the only way I get to go to the bright, shiny, new, here's the much better way to do authentication, sort of the metric system analogy, is to get everybody else to use the metric system. And they don't do that. They're always going to have reasons for dragging their feet. And you still got to, think in pounds and inches and cups and stuff like that. And so I will be surprised if we see a sea change in authentication 20 years from now. But I'm no technical expert in authentication. That's Matthias's job. Maybe he'll have a different opinion.
So. Maybe we should have a chat sometime. But I think there's important things to pick out of that. So not all amazing things that we need in the world are sexy problems. Authentication isn't a sexy problem. It is a very boring, very technical, with a lot of edge cases problem. But it's essential to enabling all of those other things that we want to do. And so, perhaps, the key message in it isn't that we need to overhaul all the security technologies entirely. There's some good reasons to do some of it. But we need to just accept that sometimes these unsexy problems just have to be solved. And they have to be solved early, and they have to be solved well. And if we don't have to solve them, all the better.
Completely agree. And in fact, I think the most boring problems are actually the sexiest problems. Those are those are the problems that everyone has, which means that you've got a giant market.
Yeah.
And you can do a little bit better. And that is to the market, enormous numbers of billions of dollars in savings, and therefore, compelling reasons to start using your approach rather than somebody else's. I mean, look at, I don't know, here's a crappy analogy, but look at Uber. It's like, here's taxis. That's a pretty boring problem, that I'm going to make a little bit better. It's like with a phone. It's like, okay, fine, I guess, and that was, whatever that's worth now, it's tens of billions or hundreds of billions of dollars.
So have you got a pick for what the next, boring but sexy problem is going to be to solve?
Ooh, I don't know. There's so many of them. The thing is what you have to look for, so your heuristic, is you look for the technology inflection points. It's like, hey, everybody's got an iPhone in their pocket that enables a slightly more efficient, or maybe incredibly more efficient approach to a boring problem. I couldn't have done Uber very well. Not that I did Uber. Uber couldn't have been done in 2005 with Windows Phone and a Nokia 30 whatever it was, awesome smartphone they had, or excuse me, a dumb phone they had. I really needed the app and the GPS and things like that. And so I guess I would start looking for, to say the truth, looking for sort of the dumb things, the dumb commodity things that are painful, that are enabled by, some cool new technology that's hitting the world. Now, the sexiest new technology that's hitting the world is actually sort of the large language models, GPT-4 and its soon-to-be successors. And those are actually kind of impressive, to tell you the truth. I mean, to tell you the truth, I kind of have I'm very cynical about amazing new technologies because they're usually not amazing. But like, I had to do like a stupid little website a month ago, and so just for fun, I went to Bing and said, "Hey, write me a website that's got a button to do this and blah blah blah," and it wrote it without errors. I'm like, "Oh my god!" And then I tried. I'm hacking around with microcontrollers right now for reasons. And it's like, hey, on an ESP32 microcontroller, write me a routine that does X, and it did it perfectly, except for like one variable specification was it said long instead of long in a printf, and I'm like, what the hell? This is amazing. And so these things aren't smart. I mean, all it is, it's probabilistically picking like the next token after the last token and such. But it is an accelerator in the same way that, I don't know, Excel was spreadsheets were an accelerator when Lotus first came out, whatever that was, 40 years ago. And that it's not making me as the accountant or the finance person or whatever any smarter. It's making me more efficient. And so there's going to be stuff out there that large language models make significantly more efficient. And I think there's going to be great businesses using large language models for making, I don't know what, teaching or customer support, or I don't know. I mean, it's usually the stuff that I'm not smart enough to imagine, but somebody else says, "Wait, what about X?" And again, I don't know. I mean, there's umpteen million companies, well, whatever, umpteen thousand companies, I'm sure, startups that are going after it now. In fact, I think all of the people who are doing, what I've heard is all the people who were doing crypto fraud are now busy doing large language model fraud. But anyway, ignore that. I mean, there's a lot of chaff, but there's a lot of like solid stuff going there. What else? I don't know. I mean, there's other. I'm sure there's a bunch of other interesting things. Here's another one. So I'm at XNOR, so we're doing machine learning on the edge. So we did some stuff that makes, I can have like really sophisticated models running on CPUs, not needing GPUs or anything like that. So you could run it on like stupid microcontrollers, et cetera. Excuse me, cheap and therefore bigger market, end devices. And so we would have people coming to us and saying, yeah, and I'm sure that 5G is really important to you because 5G, I mean, look at all the carrier advertising. 5G enables artificial intelligence. And I remember a conversation with Ali, one of the co-founders, and this like brilliant machine learning guy. And he says, why are they saying 5G enables machine learning? And I'm like, I don't know. And it turned out, of course, it was complete make-believe. They were just trying to justify 5G. But here's where I was going. The thing that 5G or subsequent communication advances like Wi-Fi 8, I think I just saw, or Wi-Fi 7 is going to be 30 gigabits in your house wirelessly. is it's enabling cheaper communications at higher bandwidth. And so with 5G and soon 6G or whatever, 5 years, 10 years, I can do what before was not economical because I needed to spend, 10 cents a megabyte out on the edge or somewhere. I can now do it for a tenth of a cent per megabyte. And so I can enable businesses that were never financially possible before because of the advances in wireless communication technologies, be they LAN like the Wi-Fi 8 or LAN like 5G, 6G, whatever. So there's stuff, look for stuff like that. I mean, the LLMs are sexy and, 5G is like, gets marketed heavily, but look for stuff like that where something becomes 10x cheaper than it was a few years ago. Because when something becomes 10x cheaper, and that's a component of an important technology, your market, suddenly you've got markets that you didn't have markets before. And that's enables the next Uber or Auth0 or whatever. So look for those 10x cheaper inflection points in some cool technology, in a infrastructure technology, and think of what business you can build now that it's that particular component is 10x cheaper. So
that's pretty good advice. And if you kind of sum up what we've had a wonderful chat today, Jon. I've been really enjoying this. And let's pick out those key messages. You can't afford to not build security into your amazing new thing when you build it. It's
correct.
cheaper to do it upfront than it is to be hurt by it later. And
Yep.
it's easy to do that. And the opportunities for building those new amazing things are only growing. Looking around at the technologies that are out there that we're able to call upon as commodities, whether that's through messaging, our payments, our authentication, but now increasingly machine learning and our trained models. So it's an exciting time to be an engineer, but I think it's also a crucial time to be a secure engineer, if you understand what I mean.
Absolutely. It's so easy to skimp on security, and it's such a mistake to do it. Nobody will ever discover this vulnerability. You've got to stand on your head and do 6 things before anybody could discover it. So we're safe. It's like, no, there will be somebody who will stand on their head and do the 6 backflips or whatever and break in. There's too much. There's too many smart people out there, and I'm a big fan of sort of looking at the economics. There's too much economic incentive. And I don't care what you're building, there's going to be an economic, if it's at all successful, there's going to be an economic incentive to break into it. And so, yeah, do not skimp on security because it will be compromised and you will be put out of business or at least be in a world of hurt because of that shortcut you took 2 years or 4 years before.
Absolutely. Look, thank you so much for your time today, Jon. It has been an absolute pleasure. And I know that much like me, our audience will have lots to think about after this. So we'll be keeping track of your adventures. Goodness knows where you'll end up next, after you're done with unemployment, of course. But thank you so much.
It was a pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.